Possible that maybe Ding missed that?
Well, this is going to be an insane game because they have 10 more moves to make, 9 more moves to make.
So we've got a time scramble, a world champion on the ropes, and a deadly combo you do not want to miss. So it's Gucci Reza with white. No, I'm joking, it's Alireza. But I heard Christian call him Gucci Reza yesterday. It did make me laugh. He's into his fashion lately, in case you missed that one. So Alireza Firouzja, white pieces, and the new world chess champion Ding Liren with black. Let's see what happened. So e4, e5 on the board. Sorry, I already had the moves up. We now see knight f3, knight c6, and after bishop b5, knight f6 is played by Ding, so the Berlin defense. And we now actually follow a game of Jan Nepomniachtchi against Ding Liren, round 9 of the World Chess Championship. So Alireza goes d3. You know, the other main move there is castles, allowing the pawn to drop, then d4, and you get the whole Berlin endgame stuff with the queens off. In this variation, no queens off the board, bishop c5 played, and by the way, you can't win a pawn, or this is the trick, you hit the knight and the f2 square. So coming back here, no takes here, we see pawn c3 played, that classic pawn structure. Both players now castle, and you can go d6 here. That's far and away the top move. But d5 is played, more a kind of modern theoretical play. We get knight b to d2, and by the way, you can capture there. Okay, there's different theory that goes from there, but this was the Nepo Ding game. We see captures, pawn recaptures, and now this a5 move stops white from going b4, gives the bishop some space. And now a key point to mention, if white takes this knight, pawn recaptures, and then wins this pawn, well, while it is playable, it's okay for black. Because you can hit this knight, you can even give a second pawn, because then the queen nudges up, hits this knight. I just said the word nudges. There's a guy who commented, I forget who, sorry, who likes that word, right? So there you go, nudges. 2 times now. Hits the knight, and after it retreats, say to d4, well, now you're winning back 1 pawn instantly. You can take on e4 or d4. Basically, black's got enough compensation here, free and easy development, plus winning a pawn back. So we don't see captures here. Instead, queen c2. And now queen e7 played to defend the e5 pawn and prepare to remaneuver this knight, oftentimes then free up this pawn. So a4 now from Firouzja. We see the knight drop back to b8, and now here Alireza goes his own way. So Nepo played rook e1, and we then saw Ding do things like c6, knight a6, h6, rook d8, queen c7, all this sort of stuff. He played for b5 later. I did just check out that game. I've not got some like super memory. Now h3 was played by Alireza instead. We got rook d8 and bishop e2, and it's a really strange looking move to me, this one. You know, I'm not sure why he didn't say start with rook e1 or something like that. Okay, there must be some subtle points, maybe preparing knight c4 without blocking the retreat square of the bishop. But we get knight b to d7 now from Ding, so he switches his plans, doesn't put the knight on a6 now. Rook e1 played, and now the knight remaneuvers to f8, opening up the bishop to develop into the game. So knight b3 hits this bishop, it drops back. We now see knight f to d2, preparing to hit this square, and this is a really interesting moment, because if you go say c6, allow the knight to hit c4, drop the bishop back, it is playable, but the computer gives white a nice edge after bishop e3. Ding, however, goes bishop e6, preparing to meet knight c4 with chopping off that knight, giving up the bishop pair, and giving Alireza this wonderful piece. But it is a computer-approved way to play. It does like this, and Ding just starts to take over the game now. So first he goes knight e6, looking at this highlighted dark square. We get g3 and then h5, looking to soften up the king side. And you don't want to meet it with h4, or knight g4 comes, the f2 pawn is sensitive, you just can't give up this g4 square. So instead king g2, we see h4 from Ding. Queen e2 now played, potentially stopping this knight from ever hopping here. And now this move of pawn g6 was criticised as weakening the king, and that can come back to punish black later on. Probably more solid was than that was starting with rook d7, playing a bit more slowly. But okay, knight d2 now from Alireza, good move, re-maneuvering. That knight had no real prospects from the b3 square, looking at these highlighted squares. So we see knight c5 now played, and knight f3 now from Alireza. So he's giving up this pawn, which Ding captures. He didn't really have a good way to defend it. You know, if you went f3, then black would be taking here and it'd be horrible. But now after takes, pawn recaptures, knight captures here. We see Alireza's idea, which is counterplay on f7, but also a lot of pressure against the e5 pawn once this knight moves. And so the best move here was bishop a2, because you preempt knight d6, hitting the bishop, and because the bishop's not on prise, you can't actually do this now, or you simply drop the pawn. If we compare this to the game, Alireza goes knight g5, and you can see it gets the question mark, because now knight d6 comes, and not only does it protect the f7 point, but it picks up this tempo on the bishop. You know, you can't take here, or simply takes, and you pick up an entire piece. So after the bishop drops back, well, now Ding's in time to defend this pawn. e4 is the computer's favourite move, but this one also decent. Okay, second best, you can see the question mark, but Alireza is not winning his pawn back anytime soon. So he goes pawn h4. Now, by the way, the computer wanted bishop f4. Alireza did look at this, but not his favourite line. But he goes pawn h4 instead, looking to soften up the king in the future. We get king g7, rook f1, again eyeing this f7 pawn. Rook a to d8 now played. Again, that gets a question mark because the computer finds this really nice queen d7 move, then preparing rook e7 to cover this point, and the queen can check from c6 potentially. Really nice maneuver. But okay, rook a d8 played. Very, very natural move. The time is running down. We now get bishop d2. This is a bit of a problem piece. And now e4 from Ding. He decides to push that one on into the heart of the position. e3 is coming, so bishop f4 from Alireza, e3, and now you want to play this combination, right, of bishop takes on d6, eliminating the defender of this pawn, and after rook takes, you know, crash through in one way or another, or maybe with the bishop, but the problem is rook d2 at the end of the line, skewering the queen to the king. So that one is not working at the moment. So rook a d1 from Alireza now prepares that whole variation because this square is covered. And this is where Ding now goes wrong in the time trouble. Look at the clock times on the left. So you want to do something about the pressure on this knight. You know, if you do nothing, there's going to be a chops there and crashing through on f7. So what should you do to defend? Well, you actually have to hop this knight in, which looks counterintuitive because you now leave the defense of f7 and white can crash through, and this is the top line. But the follow-up for black is takes on d1. This is the best way to play anyway. And after the rook recaptures, you can then go knight f2. Now it looks a bit counterintuitive because you've given the d file, but now this rook has to move away. Coming back to e1 is the best square, and now there's queen e4 check, and black just has the initiative basically after knight d3. But it's not so easy kind of calculating all this stuff. You know, bishop h6 check could be on the cards at any moment for white. Plus there's knight g5, hopping back ideas. Very, very complicated. Tough to see that line. So Ding goes knight f to e4. Very natural move. Just defending this one, right? But the problem is he's clearing the f file. Can you find the combination that Alireza unleashes here to crash through? So the move he played is bishop takes on d6. Now the knight recaptures. Very natural, of course. Can you see the follow-up move here? Again, do pause if you want to look for it. Now, the move is not rook takes on d6, which looks logical, removing the defender. Again, the problem is that at the end of the line, there's the rook d2 stuff. So coming back here, don't take on d6. Instead, it's bishop takes on f7. Knight takes, rook takes with check. The queen has to give itself up. By the way, if you step away with the king, then you're simply going to get mated soon, or okay, you pick up here, and then this is just overwhelming for white. You know, you're winning an entire rook. So you have to actually take with the queen. The knight recaptures, rook takes, queen takes, and this is potentially what Ding missed from afar, because this is a critical variation. What happens if pawn e2? Well, if you go queen e1, blockading that pawn, you're in a world of trouble because the queen is just glued to defending that pawn, and there's all sorts of ideas for black now. You know, if you imagine a rook here in combination with a bishop spinning round to take this pawn and threaten the square, maybe the king can march in. It's just really good for black, should be winning. So you don't want to blockade the pawn after e2, but this is the trick. Queen d7, just an epic move. Now, if you make a knight, I'll just show you that one first, you know, to get the check in. Well, after the king sidesteps, that does nothing to help your position. These two are going to checkmate the king. So what happens if you make the queen? The most logical piece, right? Well, then there's this amazing move. Again, do pause if you want to try and find the checkmating combos. It's not easy. The move is knight e5, discovered check from the queen. And the sequences here are just amazing. So if king f6, this is the one I was really wondering about to start with, you know, attacking the knight. Well, then the checkmate comes with knight g4. I mean, how nice is that? The way the queen and knight cut the king. They're such a good attacking combo. Plus you've got the pawn. So if the king comes this way, it's dead. If it steps to the corner, well, then you can just take the rook and you've got these kind of mates. And if instead of that, it steps up here, well, then again, there's check from here. The king comes up, check, takes, and these kind of really, really nice mates using all the pieces. So queen d7, a killer. e2, impossible. So king takes on f7 played. Queen e2 blockades the pawn, and this is now the problem. The king is marching round to e1 to blockade that pawn, and then the queen's going to be free to minesweep. So Ding here, he had the last chance to try and keep it complex. He should have stayed with king g7, something like that, stayed with this pawn, and then tried to activate these pieces in a tricky way, you know, maybe to pressure g3 and somehow get some play going. But okay, he goes king e7, preparing to bring the rook to the f-file, but then king f1, check. The king goes, rook f2, but now this queen activates in a deadly manner. The king covers the pawn. We get check. The king goes, check again. The king stays with the pawn, and now g4. Alireza gets that 2-on-1 majority going. So rook takes on b2 played. We had check. King e7, check from here, the king goes, more checks, and now if the king steps back, well, you can still take the pawn. You're going to get similar to the game, but without the king actually marching in, going for counterplay. So Ding comes up the board, we get check, here the king comes, check, king f4, might look a bit scary, but actually, where is the win for black? There isn't one, and Alireza's just marching his pawns. Now we see this check, the king goes, check. If you keep repeating, obviously that's a draw. So the king steps up, check. It gets driven to c4, but the problem is the white queen is so well placed. So the rook now, it has to come behind this pawn. This one's just way too fast compared to this one basically. But after queen f7 check, Ding resigned, because you either have to step to the g-file, blocking your own rook and clearing the way for the pawn, and this one's just so much faster as you can see. Or you have to step to d5, but then there's queen d5 check, there's a skewer, you win the rook, of course this is clearly game over, and you've got the pawn covered. So an epic win by Alireza does this for the standings. Now Nepo lost a catastrophic game against MVL, blundered, loses that one. That's 2 in a row for him. He lost to Fabi yesterday. And so Alireza, after losing to Wesley round 1, now sits in second, joint with others, Fabi out in front. There's a rest day tomorrow, then we're back with round 6. I hope you enjoyed, and check out the video on screen for another epic game of chess. Thanks very much for watching, and see you soon.